As far as the beer styles that I shoot for, I always try to just make it my own. Like a lot of Belgian brewers are this way. They'll sort of, and, you look at a lot of the American brewers and they're all stylized. Everything has to be within these small, parameters. And you read a little bit about the Belgian breweries, they all want to sort of stand out. So what you find is, they're in a sort of style because that makes it easier to sell, but they're on the far left or the far right. They don't always try to hit it right down the middle. And I try to do that with all my beers, and I'm just sort of inspired by the different breweries I worked in the past. Like, for instance, my local creator is just an amber, but it's a flashback to the 90s. And, I worked in this little brewery up in Cloverdale called Cloverdale Roth McGowan's, and they had a Cloverdale Ale, and it was like the beer, because it was named after the city that it was in, that everybody drank in there. So I like that concept and that idea. So I said, oh, I want to brew an amber because I can't find one around here that, fits that. So I started throwing in all these different things, trying to make it my own. And it's a lot more roasty. Some people are like, oh, well, it could be almost a brown ale or a red ale, or, it's got porter-esque type feelings. It's dry and roasty for an amber. So I'm always just pushing the envelope. And, that one has a great story. I was doing a porter at the time, and it just didn't finish out for some reason. I was using a London Ale 3 because I was trying to make some hazy beers, and they turned out great, but for whatever reason, this pitch, was early on, and I was just getting used to using that yeast and wasn't as familiar with it as I would like to be. But it stalled on me, so in order to get it going again, I created the amber, which was originally going to have the London Ale 3 as well. So instead, I was like, I know California Ale like the back of my hand. I put that in there, and right when it was at High Krausen, I transferred a keg of that over to the porter to sort of finish it and jumpstart it. And sure enough, it did. And it turned out to be a beautiful porter. People loved it. But in so doing, in order to make room in these small little fermenters with not much headspace, I had to pull out a keg of the porter. So, here's this rich porter. And I'm like, well, this could add a really nice distinctive flavor to the amber. So I pushed a keg of the amber a keg of the porter into the amber. And I loved it, and it turned out great, and it gave me the right hue and the right distinction and flavor. So now that I've recreated that recipe again, I've had to go back and dial it in and take a half barrel batch and reduce it down and then blend it back in and try to recreate the recipe to achieve the blend that I did originally. So that one's a really neat story, because it's generated from one of my first brew jobs ever, from a beer I liked there and a concept I liked there. But it's so much of a different beer. There was a lot of inspiration for the Wecken, which is the flour beer, the farmhouse flour that we created. There was an additional time when we had a collaboration at Russian River with an Italian brewer. I wish I could remember his name, but I don't have it. It's been quite a few years, but we did another flour beer there as well. So I just, that was the only two flour beers that I'd ever come across, but I'd always liked them so much. So I was really interested in doing it here. The only difference with the one here is I chose a bunch of different flours. I, reworked the whole recipe idea in my head to sort of bring forth, the meaning of Wecken in German is awaken. So it's like a tribute to bees and a tribute to flowers in bloom. And I always wanted to represent the color of that as well. I'm just getting more and more into color as I start to brew, and all those brews I ever brewed before were light in color and very approachable. But with this one, I wanted to use the flowers themselves as a coloring agent. The color of this beer won't really actually show too much of how it really looks unless you put a light behind it. But it's actually this really translucent sort of lavender-looking beer with bright rose colors in the middle when the right lighting is behind it. The beauty about it is the color, I think, as well, just because it sort of opens up to oh, what is that beer and where is it? How did they get the color in it? And it's all from the petals of the flowers. There's lavender and rose and hibiscus, but it was tricky getting the flavor and the profile and the color all to sort of come together. Some of the other beers I do, we do some really cool hazies that I really enjoy. And again, a lot of those are tropical and very light in color. And I remember when they first came out from the Midwest, there was this bright orange, orange Julius colors. And to me, I was always drawn to those. So, I kind of went old school and tried to bring forth those colors because I thought, again, the color should emphasize the flavor that you're seeing as well, so they combine together. So, mine are instead of big tropical notes, you've got these really heavy stone fruit flavors. So it's like peach and apricot, and I wanted to symbolize that in the color. So, this stuff looks like peach nectar. So, I kind of play off the colors as well as the flavors and try to make them match, which is a little more unique. And then, of course, my standard West Coast is probably what I go to and drink the most. So I have to have a really solid West Coast IPA. It's just amazing, the hops today. We have all these different flavors to choose from that we didn't have a decade ago. So it's really neat what you can do with beer today and with all the great raw ingredients that are out there.